Hello, everyone. This is Carla with NeedyMeds. Thanks so much for taking the time to join the presentation. As I said, we're having a little bit of audio difficulty, which will sort itself out in a couple of minutes. Unfortunately, when we do webinars recently, you can hear a little chime as if somebody's sending an instant messenger. So don't worry, though, it may interrupt just me speaking for the next minute or so, but it will not interrupt our guest panelist. And Jan, are you on the line? I can see you just logged in. Fantastic. Yes. Great. So thanks, everybody, for taking the time to join our presentation today. Today's NeedyMeds special topic webinar is myths about Raynauds phenomenon, getting the facts for a warmer, more comfortable life. My name is Carla, and I am the Director of Education at NeedyMeds. And before we kick off today's presentation and introduce our guest, I want to just go over a few quick tips. You can feel free to ask any questions you may have by typing them into the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel at any time. Just know we will reserve answering questions until the end. If for some reason we don't get a chance to answer your specific question, please know we will follow up with you within about a day after the webinar. And of course, we will also provide you the contact information for both of our organizations. Also, I will mention that today's webinar is being recorded, so you'll have an opportunity to view it again or share it moving forward, and we're going to post it on the NeedyMeds YouTube channel. It usually takes us a few days, so I would say it'll be up there by the end of this week or beginning of next week at the latest. And I'm also going to upload both of our PowerPoint presentations, so you can download them now, but I will follow up with everybody via email, providing you with those as well once the webinar is over. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you that are not familiar with NeedyMeds, here's a snapshot of our homepage. And I always put that up because really our homepage and of course our call center, those are really the faces of our organization. NeedyMeds' mission is to educate and empower those seeking affordable. And we define education in two ways. Certainly by educating people about NeedyMeds and the resources we offer. And second, by letting them know about other invaluable resources and healthcare topics, which is why we are so pleased to have our guest here with us today. It is my pleasure to introduce our host, Jan Raynaud. Jan, am I pronouncing your hyphenated last name correctly?
Yes, you are. Thank you. Perfect.
So Jan, you'll see as I talk a little bit about Jan and her resume why we're thrilled to have her with us today. She's a board member of Raynauds Association and a leader, actually, of the Scleroderma Tri-State Connect support group. Jan is an expert professionally, but also personally, as she was diagnosed with scleroderma and secondary Raynauds in 2002. She is the author of Be Your Best Advocate, Improving Your Life with Scleroderma and Autoimmune Disease, and holds a master's degree in public health and a bachelor's in biology, medical technology. So with that resume, as I said, you can see why we're so pleased to have Jan sharing her expertise with us today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen and the mic to our guest, Jan, and allow her to take it away. So Jan, that should be ready for you. Whenever you're ready, it looks like you were able to grab the screen. And everybody, thanks again for your patience and enjoy this morning's presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having me today. I'm very pleased to be here, and I hope that this is both an educational presentation as well as an open forum for everyone to ask questions and to learn a little bit more about Raynauds phenomenon. Before I get started, I just wanted to make sure that everyone can see my presentation on the screen in its full entity.
Yeah, thanks for checking in, Jan. I can certainly see it, and to make it a little bit bigger, you could again go into that slideshow mode.
Yeah, I am actually trying to see if I can get there.
Sure. And if not, we can certainly still see all of your slides without a problem, But again, if you can, at the top of your page, it says Homes and Themes, Tables. There's a slideshow button at the top of your PowerPoint. And if you click on that, it'll let you make it a little bit bigger.
Yeah, that is, it's so funny because I only have a changed presenter.
Got it. Okay, well, just so you know, and please, to our audience, feel free to type in if you're having difficulty. But Jane, from my point of view, from my point of view, I can assure you I can see your slides correctly. So I would say just clearly. So I would say just go ahead and take it away.
Okay, very good. So
great. Thanks for checking in.
I wanted to really start with some misunderstandings about Raynaud's. Raynaud's is a condition that seems to be very rare in the community. However, it is not. So I thought the best way for us to really understand what it is to go over some of the things that it is not. So I titled today 10 Myths about Raynaud's phenomenon. And just bear with me here. I am having a problem changing the slide.
Oh, there you go. Play from start.
I got it. Okay,
there
very
we
good.
go. And you should be able to right arrow over to the next slide. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, so the first myth is everyone believes that Raynaud's is a rare disease. And it's funny because when I was first diagnosed with Raynaud's, I went to my doctor and I noticed I had these color changes in my hands. And I didn't know what it was. And I'm in the medical field too. And she says to me, oh, you have a condition called Raynaud's phenomenon. Never heard of it before in my life. And I go to find out as I research it that actually there are 15 to 30 million Americans that have it, which is 5 to 10% of the U.S. population. And that's actually quite a bit. The statistics for that is not of a rare disease. A rare disease is less than 200,000 people to have it. So Raynaud's is not a rare disease. In fact, a lot of people don't even know that they have it. You know, it doesn't really show up in a lot of medical explanations. And because of that, people just think that they have cold hands. But really, they may have this condition. They're just not aware of what it is. Myth number 2, there is a formal test to diagnose Raynaud's. So when I was diagnosed, I said to the doctor, what can you do to verify that this is really what I have? And unfortunately, one of the things that happens is it has to be diagnosed on symptoms. And the best way to do that is to trigger an attack. What I mean by that is your hands usually are very red, right, filled with color. And then as they start to lose circulation, they will turn white. And then they go through this manifestation of different levels of white, purple, and then back to red. So if a doctor doesn't actually see that episode happen, he may not even be able to diagnose it. There's also some things that they might try and do, like thermal imaging, which is used to really see any kind of variations in heat in the hands. And the last thing is a cold water trigger test, where they will literally take your hands and put them in cold water and see if that will trigger a response. As we get further through the presentation, I'll tell you about some of the triggers of Raynaud's phenomenon. Now, the second thing they can do, and I did this with my doctor after I went to a rheumatologist, is there's a blood test known as an anti-nuclear antibody test. And what that is that helps to differentiate whether or not you have primary Raynaud's, which is of unknown reason, and secondary Raynaud's, which is just something that happens as a result of a secondary illness. Another thing the doctor might do is look at your nail fold. With Raynaud's, sometimes you have capillaries in your fingers, around your fingernails, where they can see if there's blood flow to those areas. So basically, there is no formal test, but if the doctor does think that you may have Raynaud's, he might order an ANA test or try to do something that would trigger you to have an episode meaning color changes of the hands. The third myth is that Raynaud's only affects the fingers and toes. So you'll find that a lot of athletes, they have Raynaud's, primary Raynaud's. That's just because they are sensitive to the cold. And the fingers, because the extremities are really your fingers and your toes, but it can actually affect different areas. You can have Raynaud's on your tip of your nose, where your nose turns white. You've seen that, I'm sure, when you get very cold, and then normal blood flow will bring it back. You can have it in your ears. I actually have Raynaud's on the tips of my ears, and due to a secondary condition known as scleroderma, that develops sometimes into little ulcers. Your tongue, your breasts, and even your sexual organs can have Raynaud's attacks. So it's not just limited to the fingers and the toes. Now, this myth is really, I find that this one I could spend a lot of time talking about, but we're going to limit it just for now. And if anybody has any questions regarding this, we can cover them later. That Raynauds sufferers have poor circulation. And this is totally not true. 90% have normal vascular function, vascular meaning blood flow and circulation. And what happens is there's a condition known as fight or flight response, where your body gets ready to either, like for example, if you get afraid of something, your body will either get ready and send all the blood flow to the internal organs, or it will get ready for a flight response to take off. And during those sessions is when you have attacks. They're not attacks, actually. It's a normal response to the body getting ready to defend itself. So Raynaud sufferers don't necessarily have poor circulation. Myth number 5, Raynaud's is an allergy to the cold. It's so funny because we're like, oh, I just don't like the cold. My hands don't like the cold. But it's not really an allergy. There is a condition called cold urticaria, which causes rashing and itching, and it looks like red allergic lesions on the body. But Raynaud's is not allergy to the cold at all. Myth number 6, Raynaud's is merely a nuisance and not a medical condition. And as a Raynaud's sufferer, I can say that, you know, it is a nuisance always having to be ready, but you need to understand what you need to really respond correctly if an episode does come. So in the instance of primary or secondary Raynaud's, primary Raynaud's, again, is from no underlying condition. You need to understand what causes that. Is it when you go into the supermarket, or when the weather is cold outside, or even the air conditioner in your house, or you get a little have a little stress? And secondary Raynaud's obviously is from another underlying condition, such as scleroderma. But you need to really understand that it is a medical condition, and make sure that there's not a secondary condition that's causing you to have Raynaud's. There's a lot of misunderstanding from family and friends, because it's really not a disease that's known as, for example, cancer or diabetes, and educating them really will help them understand that it is a medical condition, and there are things that you can do to keep yourself comfortable to try to avoid having attacks. And the best way to avoid attacks is temperature changes. I know that when I'm going to go to the supermarket or I'm going outside, I have extra clothing on. Clothing, you can dress in layers, or have that extra pair of gloves with you, or hand warmers or whatever, to cover the fact that your hand's not going to go through a temperature change. Also stress. When I get stressed, I find that it can trigger an attack. So there's different kinds of alternative therapies to deal with stress, or help to control how your body handles stress, and then lifestyle changes. You know, one of the things I had to do was actually move to a warmer climate. I went from New Jersey to Florida, but that's a worst case scenario, because I have scleroderma, and the Raynaud's attacks actually causes more interference with me with ulcers. So the best thing is really to understand what causes your attacks, and then try and create conditions that will minimize them. Myth number 7. Raynaud's episodes always involve the patriotic white, blue, red color changes. So that is very common to see that white, blue, red response, and that's due to the blood flow changing. meaning white when the blood flow is starting to be compromised, purple when there's actually constriction of blood flow, and then red when the blood flow goes back to normal. But I've had attacks which are much more milder, where your hands just turn white. And then there's the more severe ones, as I mentioned, when you go purple to grayish. And then some people have this pattern they develop, which is like a muddled pink and reddish spotting of the hands. So Raynaud's can happen in different change of color, and you just need to understand which ones are yours. Sometimes you may have mild whiter attacks, and in other cases it could develop into the more severe case where it's a purple color to a grayish black. Myth number 8, the only treatment for Raynaud's is to stay warm. Well, that is one of the ways to handle it, but there are also medications out there that help with increasing blood flow to the extremities. Some of them, for example, are called calcium channel blockers. There's also antibiotics, and they have these nitroglycerin patches or paste that help to bring blood flow for ulcers. The newest thing in medication are erectile dysfunction drugs. For women, the Viagra form is called sildenafil, which you take 3 times a day, and it helps to keep blood flow to the hands. And then there's also tadalafil, which is a Cialis. So talk to your doctor if you feel that you want to experiment with a medication that might help you deal with your Raynaud's. From a surgical perspective, there are some cases where the blood flow is really being compromised to the fingers, where a doctor would perform a digital sympathectomy, where they would go into the finger or the extremity, the toe, and they can actually manipulate the sympathetic nervous system to constantly kind of throw blood flow into that area. Self-help techniques, I am a witness to that for sure. I find that doing yoga, breathing exercises, I try a lot of different kinds of oils, heated oils, things along those lines, and you can find that information. There's stuff on our Raynauds Association that give you some tips on some things to try, as well as some natural and holistic remedies. But of course, we have to remember that they're not clinically verified, so you may want to consult with your physician if you're going to try some of these. Myth number 9. Raynauds is only an issue in cold climates and cold seasons. And that is so funny because I think about myself. In the winter, I know I have more episodes, but now living in the heated area of Florida, I find that the air conditioners can cause a really good attack for me as well, or being outside, even swimming sometimes if the water is cold. Holding a cold glass, I use actually like a little thermos insulated holder for it, and even putting your hand in the refrigerator can cause an attack. So you really just want to know your triggers so that you can try and minimize your hand exposure to some of them. And drastic temperature changes. So I'll give you an example of how that is. My hands can be cold, and then I'll take a hand warmer, which you can buy in the stores, and I'll put a hand warmer on it, and then it's that dramatic change in temperature can actually trigger an attack even worse. So be careful that you don't want to go from extreme cold to extreme hot. And then, of course, we talked about stress. And, you know, stress is very important for us to understand and how it affects our body and the ways that we can control stress, because that can also cause a Raynaud's attack. Myth number 10, Raynaud's sufferers are likely to lose fingers and toes, and this is definitely not a condition that you have to worry about unless you have serious Raynaud's and a condition with ulcerated ulcers from it. Less than 10% have serious conditions that cause complications. And that is mostly the ones that are that case are the secondary conditions, like I said, digital ulcers. Digital ulcers are when you have a condition that causes the thinning of the skin, mostly contractions of the hands in scleroderma patients, and that can lead to breaks in the skin and the ulcerations. So the best thing to do is to manage through avoidance techniques, as I said, be aware of what your triggers are, and lifestyle changes. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about our organization. And Lynn Wonderman is our CEO and president, and she has Raynauds. And the whole board, we all have Raynauds from different conditions, and we offer a lot of different advice. I welcome you to go to our website. We have products that we've personally tried to see if they help. Like, for example, Warm Skin is a cream that I use to help. And then we have different research news out there, educational materials. If you go to our Twitter or Facebook, you can get involved in a discussion forum. We have a toll-free hotline, and we offer a lot of different supports. We have a newsletter, which I think is fabulous, and it goes out quarterly, and it really helps us to understand what other sufferers are going through, and if there's anything new out there in the medical arena. So for more information, you can go to our website, www.raynauds.org. And of course, we are a non-for-profit organization. If you'd like to make a donation, we'd be greatly appreciate it. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, discussion forums where you can talk to other, and we call ourselves Frosties. So I want to thank you for listening in today. And if you have any more questions, I'm here now to answer them.
Jan, thank you so much for taking time to share your expertise in it. And like you said, I'm really glad now that you've presented in such a clear, concise way why you decided to go ahead and title this webinar as the myths surrounding this diagnosis. And I will say I'm guilty as probably most people listening today that a lot of those I did believe, in particular the one about poor circulation. So thank you for clearing that up. And if you want to go ahead and transfer the screen back to me, yes, you can do that in the change presenter, that's fine. And in the meantime, I will remind everybody to go ahead and submit any questions you may have. I do see a number of questions already coming in, and you could go ahead and submit those again in the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. One of the things I also want to mention before I do transfer this, present some of these questions to Jan, is just keep in mind also at NeedyMeds, we are a resource for helping you to afford or save on your medication or other healthcare needs, and you can do that through a number of ways. First of all, we always say don't ever hesitate to call our helpline. Some people don't have the luxury of having a computer at home or regular access to the internet, so don't hesitate to reach out to our toll-free helpline, and I'll share that number on a screen at the end of the webinar. And also visit our website where you can find assistance for any of your medication or healthcare needs. And some of the ways you can do this is by searching our prescription assistance programs database, our diagnosis-based assistance programs database, which means that if you're looking for help with costs associated with a particular diagnosis, you can check that out. We also have a pretty robust database of coupons and rebates. And if we don't have any luck connecting you to a cost savings program, we can always provide you with a free and anonymous NeedyMeds drug discount card. So I want to go ahead and put up our contact information as well as the contact information where you can reach Raynauds. And with that, Jan, I do have a bunch of questions coming in. And the first one addresses whether or not food can possibly trigger, and I'm going to put this in air quotes, a flare-up.
Okay, so our literature doesn't necessarily support any specific food, but I can tell you as a sufferer, if I eat something cold, I could have an attack.
Isn't that interesting? And we have another question sort of in this, under the same umbrella of food or beverages. Somebody was recently told that wine can actually trigger a flare-up. Has this been brought to your attention, or do you have any information on that in particular?
Yeah, so everyone, loves their glass of wine here and there, and I'm not supporting that. You should change that. But from my
Sure.
medical expertise, wine causes constriction of your extremities. We know that. Okay, so what that means is wine can make your hands and feet get cold because it causes the extremities to lose blood flow. So depending upon if you're drinking white wine that's cold, you have a double whammy there. I like white wine. I try and drink it with one ice cube in it, but you really have to check with yourself. Everyone has attacks for different reasons. If you're really
Mhm.
concerned that wine is causing it, do a little experiment for yourself and have your wine and notice if you have an attack. But in most cases, I feel that if you're not drinking excessive wine, I've never had an attack from the wine except for if it's been cold.
Great. That's very thorough and helpful. Um, Let me ask you, I'm going to phrase this just the way one of our audience members phrased this. Are attacks a learned response and should be avoided? If someone has daily and multiple attacks, is it possible that there's long-term damage that should be avoided by reducing these attacks?
Well, yes, if constant attacks, the first thing I would do is I would go and get checked with the doctor to make sure that it is primary Raynaud's, meaning that there's no underlying
Mm,
condition that could be causing you to have multiple attacks. And blood flow loss to any tissue in the body could result in tissue damage. Medication, you may want to speak to the doctor about taking medication that can stop the occurrence of the attacks. But there's definitely something to worry about as far as how long the attacks last. And the doctor will probably ask you that. When you get an attack, how long does it last? Does it last a second? Does it last 30 minutes? And really discuss with him if you're losing blood flow for a long period of time, because oxygen to the tissue, if it's compromised, can lead to damage.
thank you so much, Jan. That's really important. And I'm glad that audience member asked that question because it's probably a common one. And here's another question coming in. Jan, does there have to be a color change? We have an audience member that is experiencing pretty intense feelings in their fingers. The description is that they feel like their fingers are being squeezed in pliers or that they're on fire, but there doesn't appear to be a color change. Can you
Yes,
talk a little bit about this?
yes. So as I mentioned earlier, there are different patterns of color changes. But Raynaud's, an attack can be painful. There can be numbing. There could feel like there's no sensation in the fingers. So it's not necessarily just the color changes. It can also be, how can I say, Raynaud's is not always a color change. That's why you have to go to the doctor. And I would definitely get an ANA test done, anti-nuclear antibody test done, just to make sure at least that there's no underlying condition and that the phenomenon that you're experiencing is not from, it could be a nerve condition underneath there. You just don't really know. So the best thing to do is to see your doctor, and maybe he can do a blood test and maybe do some nerve testings down into your hands to make sure nothing else is going on.
That's really helpful. And we have some questions coming in now about whether or not children can be diagnosed with this phenomenon. We have an audience member who has just a 6-year-old who has cold hands and occasional change in coloring from white to red.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
There's really there's no difference in age as whether or not the chances of you getting Raynaud. So absolutely, yes, I would definitely seek a medical professional on, to make sure there's nothing underlying or things that you can do to help your child bear with it.
That's really helpful. And I think, as Jan is saying, and we would always say here at NeedyMeds, we're not experts in the medical field, and we always say your first step is to consult with your doctor. And I'll stress again, if there are medications or other healthcare expenses that your doctor is suggesting and you don't have insurance or your insurance isn't covering those, please reach out to NeedyMeds check out our website or call our expert counselors to see if we can help you either afford or save on whatever that healthcare expense is going to be. A couple other questions coming in, and we're only going to take a couple more questions. So again, for those of you that have questions, don't hesitate to write them in. Just know we'll follow up with you personally via email after the webinar. And I also hope that you can see I just uploaded both of our PowerPoint presentations into the handout section of your GoToWebinar control panel. So you should be able to access those. But again, I will follow up via email with all of our attendees later today or tomorrow morning. So Jan, the last couple of questions are coming in is, at what point should somebody insist that their doctor listen to their symptoms? Sometimes people feel maybe they're being dismissed by their doctor, not taking these symptoms seriously. At what point should you really advocate for yourself strongly?
Well, I am a patient advocate through and through, and when I first had a Raynaud's attack, I went right to my primary care physician, and he said to me, he said, well, it looks like you have Raynaud's, and just try, and I know this is terrible. I was smoking at the time, which is it's not good to do at Raynaud's because it constricts blood flow to the extremities. And he just kind of, and this can happen. I mean, doctors kind of think that, you know, it's okay, it'll go away. And I took it upon myself to go to a rheumatologist, which focuses on Raynaud's and different conditions. So I would nip it in the bud as soon as possible.
Yeah, I would say that we get that a lot of questions from audience members on various diagnosis-related webinars, and I think the answer really is you can't start advocating for yourself too soon.
Correct.
Wouldn't you agree with that? Right. Is this phenomenon, is it hereditary?
No, there's no evidence that it's hereditary, but secondary conditions that will cause Raynaud's may be.
Okay. And do you have any comments or thoughts on whether or not a dry or hot climate versus a cold northeast climate affects this phenomenon? And really, is it worth going to the extreme of relocating if you feel weather can play a big role?
Well, that's a great question, I have to say, because I've experienced that. It doesn't really matter where you live, it's how you manage it. Moving to Florida for myself has helped me some with my day-to-day things, but the air conditioning could be just as bad. And
that's such a good point. That's such a good point.
Yeah, and also going to a drier climate, I find that going to a drier climate doesn't necessarily help me. And I think it's really patient specific. So you can try and, you know, take all the moisture out of your house with a dehumidifier or do different experiments, but I really don't think there's one way or another. It's really based on if you feel that your Raynaud's is affecting you and your quality of life, then you might consider options like that.
I think what you're saying is such great advice, though, that doing your first certainly. And again, I'm certainly not a medical professional. I'm just mirroring what Jan has just said, some common sense tips that, first of all, do your best to advocate for yourself when it comes to your doctors and healthcare team. The next most important thing, as you said, is how well are you able to manage your own diagnoses? And again, a lot of that can come into what you're able to afford, so please reach out to NeedyMeds. And then finally, doing your best to control, if you have the ability to control as best as you can your own environment, your place of work, your office, or certainly your home, to see if you can eliminate these symptoms or certainly make them bearable before you do something so extreme as relocating the family to eliminate these symptoms. So I think that's a really that's another fantastic question, because again, probably what a lot of our audience is thinking about. One of the other things I wanted to do, and again, please, just a reminder to go ahead and send in any additional questions you may have. I believe you'll get a survey from our GoToWebinar platform at the end of this webinar, where it asks you whether or not you'd like to hear from Raynauds Association. But feel free to shoot me a message again in the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. One of the things I wanted to put up for you, and I'll leave this image with you, is we do our best at NeedyMeds to populate our calendar with healthcare topics. Every month we also do an overview webinar. So if you're interested in learning more about NeedyMeds and the resources we have to offer, please join us at the upcoming one this Thursday. But if you can't make that one, no, we do conduct overview webinars at least once, sometimes twice a month. And this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so we do have a special topic webinar related to that coming up at the end of the month. With that, I will leave everyone one more time with the contact information. So thank you for our audience for joining us, and a big thank you to Jan for today's presentation. As I had said in the introduction and the brief bio about Jan, I think we're extremely her because not only does she have the professional experience and education, but being a patient herself really provides a very in-depth way on how to manage care of yourself if you've been diagnosed with this very difficult condition. So thanks, everybody. I will send out a follow-up email probably later today, at the latest tomorrow morning. Jan, thanks so much for your time, and everybody have a wonderful afternoon. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.